Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good day today. I want to talk about the ancient architecture of the Tamil speaking people out of southern India and actually all over the world. But I think that this Tamil speaking people, Tamilakam civilization, could be pre Vedic civilization and could have existed for uh, setting humanity for existing for millions of years. Maybe I don't know. I would say numbers can vary, but 3 million years. Maybe some people say even further back than that. And I'm not going to go with that. But I want to talk about their architecture and pretty much that alone. So if you look at these temples, which are absolutely incredible, um, some of these temples have these very strange anomalies about them. Some of these temples are said that they're pillars themselves. If you were to hit one of the pillars, all the other pillars will ring, and it's almost like a singing, or not singing, like a perfect pitch. And then it's actually able to do like 6 to 7, I think it's 7 different tones, and some more than that even. And it's just incredible. And some of these too, there is an instance where the actual temple itself, it doesn't touch. Let's see if I can find the image of it. Where these are all the things I'm going to get into. Oh, here it is, where it looks like it's floating. And this is floated around, and everyone's probably seen it. But basically, you can slide a cloth underneath this, and it just slides underneath. It's a massive pillar, yet it's not touching the ground anywhere there in that image. And people can slide like slide paper, or here's another image. Anyway, it's just kind of impressive. And people were wondering, how could this be, or what's the mechanism behind it. And I was also thinking about the pyramids and everything and all this ancient architecture. And I think I want to point out that these were built from top to bottom. And that's where I'm going to go with this. And I think that if you look at this structure here, they are building it out of this one stone. And I think this is an unfinished project. I think that if they were to have continued in this would have been, this structure would have also been as intricate as the other ones. Or this is a different type, but I'm saying that you would see this over the entire piece. Because see, it's much more efficient to take stone away than to bring stone to. And this is going to bring me over here to the pyramids themselves. And I want you to look at this limestone quarries of Egypt. There's some speculating that they would cut this limestone and they would carry it and things like this, or that they would make the brick and then they would, this type of thing. I'm saying that I think it's a much wiser thing to do, and this might have been what they did with the pyramids, is taken stone away from a mountain, taken stone away, cut it away, rather than bring it to it. And I think they would use the sedimentary rock, which is limestone, and you also see it here with Devil's Tower, wherein it looks like this, and then from above, actually I could probably just find a still picture here. Anyway, there's all these perfect, let's see if we can get a little closer. Do you see this here? I'm just speculating that they cut away from, if you look at these crystal mountains here, which are incredible as well. If you think about, I've heard of there being crystal pyramids under the ocean. And I think that it would not be far-fetched either, same thing, to cut crystal away from possibly a massive mountain of quartz. And to create these structures this way. This is all possibly that they didn't carry a stone. They went to where a stone was, and see, this is all one stone, one solid mountain of sorts of granite. This was not hauled in. It was not constructed. I'm saying that I think it's plausible that they would start with a large mountain, essentially, and they would carve it down, starting from the top and go down. And this is how I think also that you have that floating pillar. This was one giant, like, granite. I'm assuming it's probably granite, but it's one enormous chunk of rock. If you think about a mountain and a cave, you can have a cave at the very bottom of that mountain, and you can go in there and you can have tons and tons and tons of stone and the weight above you. And it won't matter at all, because when people think about cave-ins, many times this is because we are mining into the cave itself and corrupting the actual integrity of the mountain itself. In this case, I think that they knew what exactly the type of the entire structure of the large piece of rock, and that they were carving from the top down over the entire structure, and that some of these temple pillars don't touch the ground because it's very similar to how, and they might have brought in the ground underneath it later, or it literally was like, if you've ever seen, and I've lived in the mountains of Montana, and sometimes you'll have whole slates of stone that the whole mountain is coming down, but somehow it doesn't collapse on itself. See, it's like an open porous space. And I think that's exactly what they have going on here. I think that's what we're looking at. And then I want to talk about the pyramids. I'm saying that I think that they built the pyramids from the top down, and they carved the pyramids out. And I want to show you the top view of the Great Pyramids from above. If I can find a shot. I want it directly over the top if they have a picture like that. They didn't bring any of this rock. I'm saying I think that they carved it down. I want a much better image of this. They did not carry, they carried away from, because it's a much smarter way to do it. And I think that they started out with sedimentary rock, and they would carve, they initially carved away. I want to go to the very top view of the pyramid and show you what it looks like. I'm sure you might have seen it, but overhead. So I'm saying that the way that many of these were, the Sphinx itself, this was one, it's carved out of one mass of rock, possibly a mountain, and they cut away and carried the rest of it off and would use that for other projects, I would assume. And they're just not going to show me this. Let me see. So this is what I'm saying, that they would start with a solid rock, much like Mount Rushmore or something like that, you know, which there's some speculation about how that was done. There's use of concrete. I think there's use of concrete as well on many of these ancient structures. But initially what they're starting out with and carving away from, all of these, it's much easier to start with one giant rock, much like this. This is a work in progress. Some people speculate that this was like, they seem to think that, and it's incredible, the stonework, but it's carving away rather than dragging all this. Well, I'm not saying that they didn't drag, but I think it's very clear that this was one examples of, these are all one piece. If you look at the Easter Island too, I think that that this ancient civilization was everywhere. As far as how it seems like, I mean, there is the instance that they may have lifted some of these stones, but I'm saying, like, and I'm not saying this applies to every single piece of ancient architecture. I'm just saying that in some instances, I do think that I think this could be a situation where it was a chunk of a mountain that was carved out of the mountain. Even this, I think it's conceivable that this was top to bottom construction, that they built these temples from the top down, and that they were carving it many times out. And I think that the reason you can see things like the impossible archways and things like that, it's because it has the support of the mountain itself. This is also why it would stand an incredible test of time and be nearly indestructible unless you intentionally destroyed it. I mean, it literally is holding itself up by itself. But if you see this here, I think that this was one, if you've ever seen carved marble and things like that, I did some sculpture back in school, and it's, you can do incredible things, and I think that's what we're looking at, and it's just much easier to do such a thing as take away than to bring forward. Also, top to bottom construction, as mentioned here, is a very efficient way to build. In some instances, building top to bottom, because it saves on cost and it saves on manpower needed as well. So they were doing, it's not always the instance, but in some cases it is more efficient to build top to bottom. And there are some instances of that. I think in Johannesburg, I believe they built the famous bank in Johannesburg was built top to bottom. Yes, so the bank in Ireland and Dublin, that was built top to bottom. The Standard Bank Center in Johannesburg was built top to bottom, and at least 3 buildings in Poland are the same thing. And it's this, it's an interesting way to build. We also see it in Bulgaria, I guess. But what I'm saying is that these people started at the top and carved down out of one piece of stone. Not in every single instance, but in most instances, I think that was a good way to do it. I think that not in every instance, but in several of them. Anyway, oh, the other thing I want to mention is, so I've said that now. I think that that's something for everybody to think on, that these are carvings in a way, not all of them, but some of them. And that even in the instance here of, there's one of the temples there that the rocks literally, like I said, if you hit one of them, all of them ring. That's because it's possible that it's because they're all one rock still, and each pillar, depending on, its position and so on and so forth, it's not that it's echoing off each other, it's that they're all connected. So when you hit one thing, it vibrates throughout the whole thing, and that's why you get this. And there are instances here, if you strike these types of rocks, the ringing rocks, it will resonate like a bell. I think they have something similar to that going on in that instance as well. And I just wanted to bring this up, that this is the reason this is like this, is literally it is hanging. This might have been naturally there, and then they carved the rest of the rock away that was also hanging. Or this was because the building top to bottom method oftentimes also goes deep into the ground. So you'll have instances of that. In fact, a lot of these temple, the engineers of these temples did the same thing, and they built deep down into the ground as well, all the way down. But if you imagine that this up here is connected to what's above it, and this was how they might have done it, and it might also be how they built the pyramids. This was basically the carving out of a cave, the carving out of a mountain, And the outside is also the sculpting, carving of the mountain itself. And that they did not take this was not, it doesn't, because it's inefficient to cut the rock and carry it to the pyramid location. It is much more realistic to cut it out of this mountain, top to bottom, and then to crawl in and to do the rest of the work like this. I think that this was what they were doing, and I think it's something for everyone to consider. I think it's very interesting. I think I've covered everything I wanted to mention. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope too that you have a wonderful day. And thank you for listening.